A storm is brewing over Roloff Farms, a scandal so explosive it threatens to eclipse every family feud and farm sale drama we've ever witnessed. This isn't about property lines or pumpkin season profits. According to insider reports and exclusive theories our channel has been piecing together, this is about a multi-million-dollar tax fraud scheme, a shocking betrayal, and the very real possibility of federal prison time. At the center of it all, Caryn Chandler, who allegedly used Amy Roloff's name and trust to commit one of the most audacious acts of tax evasion imaginable, leaving Amy to face a financial and legal nightmare from which there may be no escape. This is the story of the Phantom Write-Off, a scandal that could tear the Roloff dynasty apart for good. Before we dive into the mountain of shocking evidence and insider details, take a moment to click that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You are not going to want to miss a single update on this developing story. This is LPBW Update, and we are taking you deep inside the scandal that no one else is talking about. To understand the sheer magnitude of this alleged deception, we have to go back to a time of immense transition for the Roloff family. The final, painful dissolution of the Roloff Farms partnership. For decades, the farm was the shared dream and life's work of Matt and Amy Roloff. But as their marriage ended, so too did their business relationship. The process of separating their assets, untangling years of shared finances, was complicated and emotionally fraught. The final piece of this puzzle was the last joint tax return for the partnership, a document that would officially close that chapter of their lives forever. Amy, by this point, was focused on her new life with Chris Marek. She was building a future away from the farm, and according to sources close to her, she wanted the final financial paperwork to be over with as quickly and cleanly as possible. She placed her trust in the system she had known for years, the farm's long-standing accountant, a professional who had handled their books for as long as she could remember. In her mind, this was a routine, albeit sad, final step. She assumed the accountant would handle it with the same integrity as always. But here is where our exclusive theory, based on conversations with people familiar with the farm's inner workings, begins. Unbeknownst to Amy, a critical shift had occurred in the farm's financial command structure. Caryn Chandler, having risen from pumpkin patch manager to Matt's partner and de facto farm operations manager, had allegedly consolidated her control over the books. Matt, consumed by his monumental new house project and increasingly delegating the day-to-day grind, had reportedly given Caryn unprecedented access and authority over the partnership's finances. So when the accountant requested the numbers for that final, crucial tax year, the profit and loss statements, the expense reports, the receipts, it wasn't the meticulous, familiar records of the past he was receiving. Instead, he was being fed a stream of information curated and allegedly fabricated by Caryn. The accountant, working remotely and trusting the data provided by the on-site manager, had no reason to second-guess the numbers. He was simply processing the information he was given. Amy was signing off on a future she trusted, while Caryn was allegedly rewriting their shared past. It was in this final year, with the partnership breathing its last breaths, that Caryn purportedly saw a golden opportunity. The farm was still generating significant income, but with the impending dissolution, this was the last chance to leverage the partnership's tax structure. The plan, as pieced together by our sources, was as audacious as it was illegal. Caryn allegedly began a systematic campaign of creating millions of dollars in fake business expenses. These weren't minor fudges on the numbers. This was a comprehensive, meticulously crafted fiction designed to erase the farm's profits from existence, at least on paper. The goal was to slash the partnership's tax liability to almost zero. But the sinister genius of the scheme was how it worked in a partnership. By creating massive fraudulent write-offs, she wasn't just saving the partnership money. she was passing on a phantom liability. The tax burden didn't just disappear. It was illegally and invisibly shifted, deferred, and magnified, creating a ticking time bomb that would land squarely in Amy Roloff's lap. The spending spree, which allegedly formed the basis of these fraudulent write-offs, was as lavish as the accounting was deceptive. It was a year of indulgence for Matt and Caryn, all of it, according to our theory, secretly billed to the farm under a cloak of legitimacy. Take, for example, a luxurious European river cruise they enjoyed. On social media, it was a romantic getaway. But in the farm's ledger, it was allegedly transformed into a multi-thousand-dollar expense for overseas agricultural research, complete with fabricated itineraries detailing studies of European soil management and irrigation techniques. When Caryn was seen driving a brand new, top-of-the-line luxury SUV around town, friends assumed it was a gift from Matt or a purchase celebrating their success. But the partnership's books told a different story. It was listed as a new all-terrain farm vehicle, essential for navigating the rugged terrain of the pumpkin patch. The dealership paperwork was allegedly altered to reflect a commercial purchase, a phantom workhorse that was, in reality, a personal chariot. The deception sources claim extended to the most personal of luxuries. A stunning pair of diamond earrings Caryn was spotted wearing at a charity event. They weren't a personal purchase. A carefully crafted invoice was allegedly created from a non-existent consulting firm, billing the farm for retained geological and mineral surveying services. The cost of the earrings perfectly matched the invoice amount. The paper trail was a masterpiece of fiction. Caryn, using her intimate knowledge of the farm's operations, knew exactly what categories of expenses would look plausible. She allegedly downloaded invoice templates, created fake company letterheads, and even generated counterfeit digital receipts. A weekend getaway to a 5-star spa in Napa Valley became a management retreat for strategic planning. A collection of expensive designer handbags was coded as new durable carry-alls for crop sample collection. Every indulgence, every luxury was meticulously disguised, laundered through the farm's expense reports, creating a convincing yet entirely fraudulent narrative of a business with enormous operating costs. Millions of dollars in personal spending were allegedly transmuted into legitimate business deductions, systematically eroding the farm's taxable income, all while Amy remained completely in the dark. For Amy, life moved on. Months passed. She and Chris were settling into their new home, enjoying their life together, far removed from the daily drama of the farm. The final tax return was a distant memory, a piece of paperwork signed and forgotten. She believed that chapter was closed. Then, one afternoon, the past came roaring back in the form of a certified letter from the Internal Revenue Service. We all know that feeling of dread when an official government envelope appears in the mail, but this was something else entirely. It wasn't a simple notice or a request for information. It was thick, heavy, and radiated authority. Inside was a multi-page document that would turn her world upside down. It was a formal notice of audit for the Roloff Farm Partnership's final tax return, and attached to it was a bill. The number was so large, so incomprehensibly staggering, that she must have thought it was a misprint. The IRS had disallowed millions of dollars in deductions they had flagged as suspicious and, in some cases, blatantly fraudulent. The notice included the recalculated tax due, plus a mountain of penalties for negligence and substantial understatement of income, and on top of that, a daily accruing interest charge that was adding thousands to the total with every passing week. But the most terrifying part was a legal phrase that every business partner dreads: joint and several liability. The IRS notice made it brutally clear that as a full partner in the dissolved partnership, Amy was held personally responsible for 100% of the debt. It didn't matter who filed the numbers or who benefited from the fraud. As far as the federal government was concerned, she and Matt were equally on the hook for the entire staggering sum. The IRS didn't care about their personal disputes. They could pursue the full amount from whichever partner was easier to collect from. At that moment, Amy realized that the neat, clean break she thought she had made from the farm was a fiction. She was financially tethered to a catastrophe, and her personal assets, her new home, her savings, everything she had built for her new life was now at risk. Panic gave way to a storm of confusion. How could this have happened? She called Matt, her voice likely shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. Matt, according to sources who heard about the exchange, was initially dismissive. He reportedly claimed it was just a typical IRS mistake, an aggressive bureaucratic error. He assured her he would have Caryn look into it with the accountant and that it would all be sorted out. But his casual attitude didn't match the terrifying formality of the certified letter she was holding. This wasn't a simple error. The language in the notice was specific, pointing to disallowed expenses in categories like travel, consulting, and vehicle use. The very categories that formed the backbone of Caryn's alleged scheme. Amy's intuition told her something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. The trust she had placed in the process had been shattered. On the advice of a frantic and worried Chris, she made a decision that would change everything. She decided to hire her own expert, someone who would fight for her and her alone. She sought out a forensic accountant. This is a crucial turning point in the story. A forensic accountant is not your average CPA who just looks at numbers. They are financial detectives trained to follow the money, uncover deception, and trace fraudulent activity back to its source. Amy, armed with the terrifying IRS notice and a copy of the final tax return she managed to obtain, sat down with this expert. The accountant was methodical, calm, and professional. He explained that his job was not to place blame, but to find the truth hidden within the numbers. He began a deep dive into the farm's financial records, cross-referencing the partnership's expense logs with public records, social media posts, and financial databases. It didn't take him long to find the rot beneath the surface. The convincing paper trail that Caryn had allegedly built to fool a busy accountant was no match for a seasoned fraud investigator. The discoveries came fast and were more shocking than Amy could have ever imagined. The accountant called her in for a meeting a week later, his desk covered in files and printouts. He walked her through his findings, and with each revelation, the scale of the betrayal grew. "Let's start with this expense here," he would say, pointing to a line item, a charge for $50,000 for emergency equipment transport. We traced the payment to a private jet charter company. The tail number of the aircraft corresponds to a flight that took Matt and Miss Chandler to Scottsdale, Arizona for a weekend. We found social media posts from that same weekend of them on a golf course. He then turned a page. Here we have a series of invoices for new staff uniforms from a supplier listed as CC Boutique. The total comes to over $75,000. There is no registered business with that name. However, the amounts on these invoices perfectly match credit card statements for purchases made at Chanel, Gucci, and Louis Vuitton. He showed her how the European River Cruise, coded as agricultural research, was actually a publicly available Viking River Cruise tourist package, the dates of which perfectly aligned with Matt and Caryn's vacation photos. He uncovered the truth about the luxury SUV, pulling up the vehicle's registration and showing it was registered as a personal vehicle, not a commercial one. The retained consulting services for the diamond earrings were traced back to a shell company with a P.O. box that was registered under a name with known ties to Caryn's extended family. One by one, the forensic accountant dismantled the fiction. He laid bare the entire scheme, showing Amy a clear and undeniable pattern of personal enrichment disguised as business expenses. He showed her the fake invoices next to the real credit card statements. He presented a timeline that linked every lavish trip and luxury purchase to a corresponding fraudulent write-off. The report he compiled wasn't just an audit, it was a damning indictment. It was a detailed, evidence-backed narrative of a calculated long-term fraud designed to deceive not only the IRS, but Amy herself. As Amy sat there staring at the undeniable proof, the full weight of the situation crashed down on her. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't negligence. This was a deliberate, malicious act of deception. Caryn hadn't just cheated on the farm's taxes. She had used Amy's name, her signature, and her trust to commit a federal crime, leaving Amy to face the devastating consequences. Holding the thick report from the forensic accountant, Amy knew her next step. She had to confront Matt. This was no longer just about money. It was about a profound betrayal that had put her entire future in jeopardy, and the reckoning was about to begin. The confrontation was inevitable. Armed with the forensic accountant's report, a document that felt as heavy as a tombstone in her hands, Amy drove out to the farm. According to sources close to the family, this wasn't a prearranged meeting. She didn't call ahead. She simply appeared, a storm cloud on the horizon of what was likely a peaceful afternoon for Matt and Caryn. She found them near the new house construction site, looking over blueprints, planning a future that was, unbeknownst to them, built on a foundation of criminal fraud. The air allegedly crackled with tension the moment they saw the look on her face. This wasn't the amicably divorced Amy. This was a woman betrayed, a woman whose entire financial security had been placed on the line. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She laid the report down on a stack of lumber, its stark white cover a stark contrast to the rustic setting. "We need to talk about the final partnership tax return," she said, her voice reportedly low and steady, yet trembling with contained rage. Matt, ever the pragmatist, probably started with a dismissive wave. "Amy, I told you, we're handling it. It's just the IRS being the IRS. Caryn has the accountant on it." But Amy cut him off. "No, Matt, the accountant didn't do this. He was given fraudulent information. You need to look at this." And she opened the report. She didn't just make accusations. She presented the evidence piece by damning piece, just as the forensic accountant had presented it to her. She pointed to the section on the private jet to Arizona. "Explain this, Matt. Explain how your golf trip became emergency equipment transport. Here's the flight manifest, and here are your own social media posts from that weekend." Caryn, according to insiders who have heard retellings of this encounter, immediately went on the offensive. She allegedly scoffed, feigning outrage. "This is ridiculous. Amy, you're just bitter about the farm. You're trying to cause trouble. You signed the return too. If there's a problem, you're just as responsible as we are." This was a classic gaslighting technique. Deflect, deny, and try to shift the blame. But Amy was prepared. She had been warned by her accountant that this would be the likely response. She didn't even look at Caryn. Her eyes were locked on Matt. She turned to another page in the report. And this, Matt, over $75,000 in new staff uniforms. Except the money went to Chanel, to Gucci. Here are the credit card receipts, Caryn's name right on them. What staff on this farm wears Chanel uniforms? The color reportedly drained from Matt's face. He looked from the report to Caryn, a flicker of doubt in his eyes for the first time. The denials, the excuses, they started to sound hollow even to him. For every fraudulent expense, Amy had a corresponding piece of irrefutable proof. The European research trip, cross-referenced with the Viking River cruise catalog, the luxury SUV's personal vehicle registration, the fake invoices from non-existent companies. The forensic accountant had left no stone unturned. The report wasn't just a summary. It contained copies of the original documents, the forged documents, and the real documents, side by side. It was a visual testament to the depth of the deception. The final blow, The one that shattered Matt's denial completely was allegedly a detail about the falsified receipts. The forensic accountant had discovered that the digital templates used to create many of the fake invoices were from a software package that Caryn had purchased with her own credit card just 3 months before the tax year began. The report included the receipt for the software itself. It was the digital smoking gun, the proof of premeditation. It showed this wasn't a series of mistakes or exaggerations. It was a pre-planned, systematic scheme to defraud the government. Matt stared at that receipt, and in that moment, the entire world shifted. He realized this wasn't Amy being vindictive. This was real. The swagger, the confidence drained away, replaced by the cold, creeping dread of understanding. He looked at Caryn, who was now silent, and he saw not just his partner, but a woman who had gambled with their entire future. This wasn't about cheating Amy out of her fair share anymore. This was a federal crime, and they had committed it using Amy's name, making her an unwitting co-conspirator in a multi-million-dollar tax evasion scandal. The argument was over. A terrifying silence fell over the construction site, the half-built frame of their dream home now looking like the skeleton of a prison. The fallout from that confrontation was swift and catastrophic. The days that followed, according to our exclusive sources, were filled with a level of turmoil the Roloff family had never before experienced. The fight between Matt and Caryn was said to be volcanic. Matt, consumed by a mixture of rage and sheer terror, demanded answers. How could she do this? How could she be so reckless? He had entrusted her with everything, and she had driven them off a cliff. Caryn's defense, from what we've pieced together, was a combination of downplaying the severity and attempting to justify her actions. She allegedly argued that everyone does it, that she was just being aggressive with the books to save them money, to secure their future. She may have even tried to frame it as an act of loyalty to Matt, a way of protecting his assets from being further divided in the partnership's dissolution. But her justifications crumbled in the face of the legal reality. This wasn't just aggressive accounting. It was felony tax evasion, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Shaken to his core, Matt did what he should have done months ago. He sought independent legal counsel. But he didn't go to a simple family lawyer. He went to a top-tier criminal tax attorney, the kind of lawyer who deals with federal cases and whose fees are astronomical. The meeting was a brutal awakening. The lawyer, after reviewing Amy's forensic report, laid out the grim reality in no uncertain terms. He explained that the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, or IRSCI, would likely get involved. These aren't auditors, they are armed federal agents who investigate financial crimes. The lawyer used phrases that hung in the air like a death sentence: conspiracy to defraud the United States, filing a false return, aiding and abetting. Each charge carried the potential for up to 5 years in federal prison and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines per count. The lawyer then delivered the most chilling news of all, confirming what Amy already knew about joint and several liability. He explained to Matt that the government's case was incredibly strong, especially with the evidence Amy's accountant had already compiled. But the real danger, the lawyer stressed, was Amy herself. As a partner who was demonstrably unaware of the fraud, she was in a position of immense leverage. Her legal team would almost certainly advise her to cooperate fully with the IRS investigation. She could become the government's star witness against Matt and Caryn. In exchange for her testimony in the forensic report, she could be granted immunity or a significantly reduced penalty, leaving Matt and Caryn to face the full wrath of the federal government alone. The lawyer painted a stark picture. Amy could walk away relatively unscathed, while Matt could lose everything: his farm, his money, his freedom. Caryn's desperate gamble to secure their future had, in fact, put a gun to its head. And so the family drama morphed into a high-stakes legal war fought by teams of expensive lawyers in sleek downtown office buildings. Amy's legal team, smelling blood in the water, moved aggressively to protect her. Their strategy was clear: position Amy as the victim, the innocent partner who was deliberately deceived. They immediately initiated contact with the IRS, signaling their intent to cooperate. They presented the forensic accountant's report as a good faith offering, a roadmap for the federal investigators to follow. They began preparing a petition for innocent spouse relief, a provision in the tax code, though they knew it was a long shot in a partnership case. The real strategy was to make Amy so valuable to the prosecution that they would have no choice but to offer her a deal. She was no longer just Amy Roloff, reality TV star. She was witness number one. On the other side, Matt and Caryn were in a full-blown crisis. Their new lawyer had the unenviable task of trying to contain a 5-alarm fire. His first piece of advice was absolute silence. No more social media posts about lavish trips. No more public statements. They were to disappear from the public eye as much as possible. His second piece of advice was to prepare for a fight that would drain them financially and emotionally. He began building a defense, but the evidence was overwhelming. Their only real hope was to negotiate a plea bargain, to try and settle the case before it went to a grand jury. But that would require them to admit guilt, pay back all the taxes, plus exorbitant penalties and interest, and even then, there was no guarantee of avoiding prison time, especially for Caryn, who was clearly the architect of the scheme. The power dynamic had been completely inverted. For years, Matt had held the power on the farm. Now, his entire fate rested in the hands of the woman he had divorced, the very person his partner had tried to defraud. Now let's dig deeper into an exclusive theory our channel has been developing, something that adds another sinister layer to this scandal. What about the farm's original accountant, the one Amy trusted for years? Was he simply a pawn, an overworked professional who was duped by a clever client? Or was he complicit? Sources with knowledge of forensic accounting practices suggest that the sheer volume and blatant nature of the fraudulent expenses should have raised at least a few red flags for any competent accountant. Millions of dollars in write-offs in categories that suddenly ballooned in the final year of a partnership. It's highly unusual. Amy's forensic accountant, in his deep dive, reportedly uncovered something else that was deeply troubling. A series of consulting payments made from one of Caryn's shell companies directly to the accountant's personal bank account, totaling nearly $50,000. These payments were not on the farm's books, they were off the record. The theory is that this was hush money, a bribe paid to the accountant to ensure he would process whatever numbers Caryn gave him without asking any questions. If this is true, it elevates the crime from simple tax evasion to a full-blown criminal conspiracy, ensnaring the accountant and making the case even more serious for federal prosecutors. And what about the Roloff children? This scandal didn't happen in a vacuum. The news of a federal investigation would have ripped through the family like a shockwave. According to people who know the family dynamics, the children would likely be torn. Zach and Tori, who still had a working, if sometimes strained, relationship with Matt and were physically closest to the farm, would be in an impossible position. They rely on the farm for a significant part of their public identity and income through the show. A federal scandal of this magnitude could jeopardize everything. Would they stand by their father, or would their loyalty lie with their mother, the clear victim in this situation? Jeremy and Audrey, having distanced themselves from the farm drama to build their own brand, might see this as the final toxic implosion of the family legacy they chose to leave behind. It would be a source of immense private pain and a public relations nightmare they would have to navigate carefully. The scandal forces the children to choose a side in a war where their mother is the victim and their father is the potential felon. The family, already fractured by the farm sale dispute, could be irrevocably shattered by this ultimate betrayal. Let's also consider Caryn's motive. Why would she take such an enormous risk? Was it simple, unadulterated greed? Our inside theory suggests it was something far more calculated and personal. For years, Caryn had existed in Amy's shadow on the farm. She was the employee who became the partner. This scheme, in a way, was her ultimate power play. It was a way to financially write Amy out of the farm's history. By creating millions in fake expenses, she was effectively erasing the profits that were co-created by Amy over decades. She was ensuring that the final distribution of the partnership's assets would be heavily skewed in Matt's and therefore her favor. It was a scorched earth financial tactic designed to cripple Amy as she exited the partnership and to solidify Caryn's own position as the new, undisputed matriarch of the Roloff empire. She wasn't just stealing money, she was attempting to steal Amy's legacy. She gambled that Amy wouldn't look too closely, that the accountant wouldn't question her, and that the IRS wouldn't notice. It was a gamble she was on the verge of losing in the most spectacular way possible. As the legal teams postured and negotiated behind the scenes, the pressure from the outside world began to mount. The IRS audit was no longer just a letter-writing campaign. It escalated. According to our sources, IRS CI agents were now officially assigned to the case. Subpoenas were issued to the farm's bank, demanding years of financial records. The charter jet company was subpoenaed. The luxury car dealership was subpoenaed. The credit card companies were compelled to turn over every statement associated with Matt and Caryn. The web of evidence was being officially woven by federal investigators. Friends and former employees of the farm were reportedly contacted for interviews. The investigation was expanding, turning over every rock, looking for anyone who knew about or participated in the scheme. The threat of a raid on the farm, with federal agents seizing computers and boxes of documents, became a very real possibility. The idyllic Roloff Farms, once a symbol of a family's dream, was now a crime scene. Matt and Caryn were living in a state of constant paranoia, their every financial move under a microscope. The new dream house, once a symbol of their future, now stood as a monument to their potential ruin. Its construction stalled as legal fees mounted into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. This brought Matt to a point of utter desperation. Facing financial ruin, the loss of his reputation, and the very real threat of prison, he knew he had only one card left to play: an appeal to Amy. He couldn't go through lawyers anymore. This had to be personal. He allegedly reached out, requesting a secret meeting, away from the lawyers and the prying eyes of the family. He was a changed man, no longer defiant or dismissive, but humbled and terrified. He met Amy at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop far from the farm. There, he reportedly laid everything on the table. He admitted the fraud. He apologized for his blindness, for his misplaced trust, and for the nightmare this had put her through. And then he begged her to help him. He offered her a deal, a proposal that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. He offered her everything. He would sign over his remaining half of the original farm, the full 32 acres she had always fought for. He would liquidate personal assets to pay the entire IRS bill, including all of her potential liability. He would create a multi-million-dollar trust fund for their grandchildren. He offered her complete financial restitution and the final undisputed victory in their long battle over the farm. In exchange, he asked for one thing: for her to tell the IRS that it was all a terrible misunderstanding, a series of catastrophic accounting errors, not a deliberate fraud. He was asking her to lie for him, to muddy the waters just enough to allow his lawyers to negotiate a civil settlement instead of a criminal conviction. Amy left that meeting with an impossible choice. On one hand, she held the offer from Matt, an offer that represented total vindication, financial security beyond her wildest dreams, and the final possession of the farm that held her life's work. It was everything she had ever wanted. On the other hand, she held the path of justice. Cooperating with the federal government would mean saving herself legally, telling the truth, and holding Caryn and Matt accountable for their actions. But it would also mean potentially sending the father of her children to prison, creating a scandal that would publicly disgrace her family forever, and likely forcing the sale and destruction of the very farm she loved. She sat with Chris that evening, the two paths laid out before her. One path led to justice and potential destruction. The other led to forgiveness and immense personal gain, but at the cost of covering up a crime. Her decision would not only determine the fate of Matt and Caryn, but would define the final chapter of the entire Roloff family legacy. Will Amy choose to be a victim who seeks justice, or a victor who accepts the spoils of a truce? The answer will seal the fate of Roloff Farms forever. And you can be sure we at LPBW Update will be the first to bring you that answer. Stay subscribed. The final reckoning is yet to come.